As you may have watched my last episode where we talked about cruising, today we're going to talk about navigation. How do we navigate and get out there on the water? I'm here in the captain's salon, and we're going to work out of this book, The Handbook of Sailing. This book right here has every basic thing you need to know. Let's turn right to navigation. Okay, we turn to navigation here. Now, we've got a lot to cover, but I want to bring my point of view to it and kind of simplify it. There's a lot of reading material, but we don't necessarily need to go through all that. But we do need to understand basic terms. We kind of need an understanding of our instruments. We need to learn how to shape a course. We need to read some charts, and we need to think about our water situation with tides and currents. Then we could talk about perhaps night sailing or in the fog or navigating in those conditions. So let's get right into it. When I go through the book, I'll just kind of glean through starting to navigate, and I realized that a lot of plotting instruments and things from old time we don't use because we might have a chart plotter, electronic stuff, but one of the main things is a compass. Our instruments, look at that. We have a bulkhead compass on this boat, so it's fixed to the boat at the helm. It's in a parallel line with the center line of the boat. So if I'm off by degrees, I can see how many degrees from my point of sail. I can use that to plan a point of sail. Now, if I had a tiller boat, I might have a compass mounted in a good location, still with the center line of the boat, but it doesn't have to be dead center. It just has to be mounted parallel with the center line of the boat. A lot of times if we're on a lake or in a small boat and you're confident enough, you don't have to use a compass. If you have something that is a fixed object, you're running fix, you can see it on the shore. If you're out in the Gulf or a bay too far out, you would need to use your compass. So we're going to talk about that compass for a second. So when you look at the compass and you look at that point, that fixed point, that running fix, and you refer down to the compass how many degrees you're sailing at compared to north. And if, let's say, you're 30 degrees to north, okay? So you can see when you fall off 5 degrees or 10 degrees either way, and you can correct that back manually with your tiller or your helm. You can correct that back quickly if you keep an eye on it with your tiller or your helm. You can also use that to sail and use time. So you could use that to say, we could sail on a tack for 10 minutes, and then we could make our tack maneuver, and we could sail back for 10 minutes. And we can make another tack and sail for 10 minutes. So we would cover a lot of area. We wouldn't gain any forward progress unless we were kind of beating into the wind, closer hauled, where we tighten up the sheets. And now it's 15 minutes, but the angle is closer to the point of sail, and then we go 15 minutes, and so on. So you make a little more headway towards your running fix. The next thing we have to think about is our depth sounder, our depth finder. Let's say we want to stay in the right amount of water. Let's say that our point of sail, our running fix, out there is on the shore and we're sailing towards it. Well, the shore is going to get shallower and shallower, and you may have obstacles in the water to the right or left or ahead of you. So you have to say, I'm going to sail into that, and I need a depth sounder or a depth finder, and I need to monitor that. So on this boat, we have those instruments on the binnacle. Well, that's important. So let me show you what that looks like on a basic boat where maybe you don't have navigation. Right here. The most important thing, because I have to have a fixed paper map on the boat. I got 2 of them for this lake. Now look, if I want to go to the other shore or back, then I can see the contour lines. I can see the water depth. I can see it all right here. And if something happens and my electronics battery dies and that depth finder goes out, I can use this as a visual reference, and I can get pretty close with my knowledge of the lake, providing I've been out on the lake and checking it out. A lot of times when I had a power boat, a bass boat, I would cruise around the banks and monitor the depth, and remember that. You could also make notes on this if you would like. I have mine in a plastic so it doesn't get wet, but I do have another one up here that I could fold out on the table, and I could mark points of interest or rocks or things like that. So I recommend having the paper chart. But these days, with our cell phones and what have you, so I use iBoating. As you can see, this shows the same body of water, and I can zoom in, and so many more topographical lines. I can see where depth changes. I can see where objects are and things like that using iBoating. I can plan a course, a route manager, and it will track my route. And then I can see where I've been in the past, and I can stick to that plan. So I can see where I'm at, I can plan the whole trip back, avoiding obstacles and hazards out on the water. I can estimate a time so I'll know what my sail plan is, so I know when to expect to get back. But this is what we have at our disposal on our phones. Get an account with them, turn on record, auto follow, and you can use that along with your map and your navigation depth finder. Now, if you have a chart plotter permanently installed on the boat that does that, that's a win, because you can save your charts and you can look at your direction and you can practice that maneuver right from the binnacle. And something happens and your phone dies, you got it right there on the boat. But if you have a tiller boat, you can buy a handheld one, or you can just simply get the app on your phone. Okay, so next is shaping a course. Okay, so we just kind of talked about a few terms and philosophies there, but here is something that I use all the time. I think it's the most important. That's why I go through the book and I say, well, what do you guys need to know right up front? You know, you could get lost in, okay, shaping a course. Oh, it's so technical. We have to get our calculators and our rulers and all that. No. We need to know a few terms. Windward, leeway, you know, going into the wind, going away from the wind, starboard tack, port tack, winds coming from the starboard, winds coming from the port. Why does that matter? Well, I'll show you, because I've made a chart that I use right here, and this will help you out tremendously. If you have to pause the video and just look at that for a second, and then I'm going to explain it right there. So here's what I was talking about earlier. This is your running fix, your object, okay? And so if you look at the straight line down there, that is your point of sail, and from where you're at, here's you down here. And that's where you want to go. Okay, so this is basic, but it's very helpful because of what I just talked about obstacles, keeping on this running fix. If you don't have a running fix, I drew the compass in right here. The compass position line is the same when the boat's down here pointing to where you want to go, the running fix. You would just find out how many degrees that is on your compass, and that's your center point. Center line. So next, we're going to go the tack limiting lines. Those are these angled lines on the outside over here. Now those are going to show where you tack. So right here we have the wind direction from the starboard side. We're on the starboard tack. We get to a certain point, maybe in minutes, then you come back. But look, 5 degrees gets way further away from the center line when you look at it like that. Because the closer you get to your running fix and your object, you're going to tack sooner and sooner and sooner till you get there. Because imagine if you tacked for the same amount of time every time, and your tack limiting lines were not 10 degrees from your fixed point. Let's say they were parallel. Well, you would go across and you would hardly make time towards the shore or the position you're going. So right there, I see this as a trick that I use. I'm going to tack sooner, and I'm going to limit, so that means more tacking the closer I get in distance towards the point of sail that I'm going. So right there, if you're on a beam reach and then a beam reach and a beam reach, you're going to take longer to get there. But imagine if we took the dotted lines right here, imagine if we close hauled, here's the wind direction, and we close hauled and we went up here and hit this tack point instead of there on a beam reach. Well, then we would do the same thing over here and then the same thing to our point. So we would get there a little bit quicker if we had the wind. Lighter wind, it may be better to do a close reach and split the difference there. So right there, that kind of ensures that I get closer to my point. And as I mentioned, if there's objects over here and it's imperative that you go to the fixed point, then you're going to need to do it this way. And so let's say you're out sailing in open water and you get closer. Now we're talking about it getting shallower and shallower and shallower. If you put it all together right there, you can see that you're just using a few different things to navigate. Navigation is just putting all that together, right? So now we can say, okay, we've got that envisioned in our head, our fixed point. We kind of understand we're going to there, what we're going to have to do. So now you know how to plan that sail, that course. Now you know what to expect, when to expect it, when to make a maneuver, when to tack. And you explain this to your crew and guests. They will know that they're going to get there in a certain time because they're out just enjoying the ride and concerned about time, not so much doing the actual sailing. And you want to make sure you make your times. So you kind of just figure that all out, and you can figure it out on paper, where you're going to go, what points of sail, where are your fixed objects, and how you're going to tack and beat into the wind, and then turn around and run. And so go a straight line or so to your next point, and then beat into the wind back. If you do kind of a time base, we're going to go 15 minutes, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. You get it. So we can kind of count those lines and estimate how we're going to get there easily without having to get all technical and get everything out and chart it out. You know, we're just trying to have fun out here and learn a little basics of sailing. Maybe you just bought a boat. Maybe you're trying to learn this stuff before you actually go pull the trigger on a boat. So the next thing is the tides and the current. On a lake situation, we're not going to have tides, but the currents could be where from the wind direction pushing the waves and the water a certain direction, and it could be windy, white capping, and so, or it could have it could have a lack of current. So that's the only in a lake body of water, unless it's in the Great Lakes or something. Otherwise, you'd be out in a bay, and then you would have some bay currents. Other from that, you're going to be out on the coast, and you're going to fight tidal currents there. And so I'll give you one good example of this. Okay, so here's something to think about, and let's pause and think about this. This boat has the 20-horse universal diesel, and I'm only going to get so many knots out of it. So I go out, and I go and beat into the wind sailing, right? And so I'm using the wind to move forward like we just talked about. But let's say the wind pipes up to a wind that my boat won't handle, and I've got to turn into the wind, turn the motor on, and now trying to get back to the marina. Okay? I'm trying to get back to the marina, but now the wind is picked up. Maybe there's a storm coming in, and now the wind is pushing and creating a current towards me that's greater than my motor will push forward. So if my motor can push forward 4 knots, but it's coming at me at 7, guess what's going to happen? And that's a hypothetical example, but think about that. It's more so out on the coast, not so much in bays, and hardly ever on the lake you're going to get in that situation. But imagine if you're on a tiller boat and your outboard motor, now this has happened when I was a kid. We've dumped them off the back, things have broke, they've gone bad, and we're getting our paddles in a 20-something foot boat, and we're paddling. Now, do you think you can paddle into the wind a 22-foot boat, maybe with 3 or 4 people? That's how you end up on the other side on the bank. Right there, you think about those things and kind of plan it out. This is what we think about. We think about those things, and we think about the wind, what it could do to the water currents. We think about the tides. We think about the depth of the tides, wherever we're at, how much they affect them, because that may affect when you go out or come in, and then you kind of have to make sure you're back at those times. And so yes, we could pull the sails down and motor and make a certain headway, but if the current or the wind is fighting against us, we're not going to make it in time. So think about those things right there. This is kind of how we shape a course, and this is the stuff we think about when we think navigating. We kind of get these basic things in our mind, and it plays out. The better it plays out when we're out on the water, the more confidence we're getting, the more experience we're getting. And lastly, what if it's at night? What if it's in the fog? What if the fog comes up all of a sudden, or you want to go out into the fog? Okay, nighttime. So the sun's going down. Sunset sails are phenomenal. You get great photos and videos, and it gets dark. Well, now that's where your navigation knowledge is crucial, because you may need to look at that chart plotter and stay on that trail that you've sailed before, that you practiced, and you sail that trail and you put it in the chart plotter, and now all of a sudden it's nighttime and you know what trail heading to go. And so you could be off and get into shallow. You could be off and there could be an island or something there, or a boat ramp or marina, something with a dock sticking out, and you're off course because it's nighttime. Things don't seem as clear as when you're in day. So this is why you have the term the day sailor term, because when it gets at night, it's a little more difficult to sail unless you have this basic knowledge. And that's the reason I'm making this video, was because navigation should be right here. You should start thinking about this kind of thing to get your navigation in check. So the next thing is, you've got the charts, or you know how to read your you know how to read your running fix, which is now at nighttime going to be a light on the bank. But you have to know that light. You have to know what it is, that tower, that apartment complex, whatever. You have to see the color of it. You have to stick to that with your compass. So I had a good example of that one time where I thought, oh, I'm going to the light and I'm going to the tower, but it was really the boat ramp light, and now I'm going straight towards the ramp instead. And I noticed at night that my depth was getting shallower and shallower the closer I got to the light, that running fix. And so I was paying attention and just tacked 90 degrees and avoided that catastrophe. So that's where that gets a little more difficult. I wasn't using a chart plotter. I was just using the running fixes and the compass lines, and it was a real nice sail. I think we put a video on our vlog about that, sailing at night. Then it went dark, and then you could hear us talking and you could see the lights. Well, that was when I figured it out right there. So the next thing to talk about is the fog. That fog comes up, or you want to go out in the fog. Well, that's where you're going to use this same thing. You're going to need to have a bell, something to sound in the fog. You're going to need to stay on your chart. You're not going to be able to see any. So how would I get back if I'm on a tiller boat? I don't have a navigation. All I have is a paper map. Well, right there, this is where your depth finder is crucial and your compass is crucial. Because if you have written down on your map where you're at, or you have your iBoating app, or you have your phone app iBoating and you can see it, and right there, that would save you. Because otherwise you have to motor very slowly, look at depth, and visual sight. You'd have to maybe have someone on the bow, and then you were looking forward and just going very slow and sounding your bell, and this would save your life right there. You could look and stay on your course. If you have the chart plotter on the boat, even better, because if you lose power on your phone and you don't have any way to charge it, then that would be bad. So these are the things that we have to think about navigation. This is what I've gleaned out of it over the years, and this book. And that's why I use the Handbook of Sailing. And I do this, and I hope that you can use some of these terms and techniques and get a boat and use it on your next outing and help to make a better sail for you, your crew, and your guests. More confidence, better sailing. We'll see you out there.